Hello, welcome to Citizens for Global Solutions, Minnesota. I'm Katja. Citizens for Global Solutions, Minnesota is a nonprofit organization based in the state of Minnesota in the United States. Every third Thursday of every month, we host a global movies discussion about a movie based in true events or a documentary chosen to expand our horizons and educate us about important topics. The event is free and open to anyone. If you want to learn more about CGS Minnesota work, please visit our website, www.globalsolutionsmn.org, and follow us on Twitter and Facebook pages. As part of our program, we recommended the film Worth, which tells the true story of Ken Feinberg, attorney specialized in mediation and alternative dispute resolution. Ken received more awards and recognitions than time will allow us to recount, but to mention a few, in 2013, he was listed in the 100 most influential lawyers in America by the National Law Journal. He received the Yale University Legend in Leadership Award in 2014 and the Thomas Jefferson Foundation Medalist in Law in 2014. He is adjunct professor of law at Georgetown University Law Center since 1978 and at Harvard Law School since 2012 and several other law schools during his career. Ken shared his extraordinary experience in his book, What is Life Worth, in 2005, and his follow-up book, Who Gets What, in 2012. Ken was appointed a Special Master of the US government's September 11th Victim Compensation Fund and served as a Special Master for TARP Executive Compensation. Ladies and gentlemen, to share his extraordinary experience, I let you with Ken Feinberg. Ken, thank you for accepting our invitation and welcome.
Well, thank you very much. It was an honor to get the invitation, and it took me 2 seconds to accept the invitation. I want to thank you, Katja, for all of your preliminary work in making sure that this evening took place, and I am quite honored to be part of a very distinguished history of your global solutions, and I'm very, very pleased to be here this evening. Now, as I understand it, our audience has seen the movie, and the movie is called Worth. It is currently playing regularly on Netflix, and I want to give everybody a little bit of background as to the unusual circumstances surrounding the making of this film. In 2001, just 13 days after the 9/11 attacks at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon and the 4 airplanes, Congress passed a law. And the law simply said that anyone who lost a loved one on 9/11, World Trade Center, the Pentagon, the 4 airplanes, or anybody who was physically injured as a result of the attacks could voluntarily decide not to sue, not to go to court. You could if you want to, but you could refuse to go to court and instead voluntarily opt into a very special, unique, unprecedented federal compensation fund, funded entirely by the taxpayer, public money. You don't have to if you want to go to court and sue the airlines and sue the World Trade Center and sue Massport and the Port Authority of New York and sue this private security guard companies at the airports, etc. You could do that. But if you'd rather take very generous compensation from the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund, it will be designed and administered by Feinberg, Kenneth Feinberg. He's the guy who will process all of the claims. Well, for 33 months, I did just that. I processed about 7,500 claims, found 5,300 eligible, and paid out public taxpayer money about a little over $7 billion. 5,300 people, loved ones lost on 9/11, claims filed by family members, or those who escaped the World Trade Center or the Pentagon, but were physically injured. They entered the fund. The average award for a death claim was $2 million tax-free. The average award for a physical injury claim was $400,000 tax-free. The highest award I issued was for an injured woman who had been a stockbroker in the World Trade Center. She managed to escape, but she escaped with third-degree burns over 85% of her body. We paid her about $8 million. The least amount paid was for a waiter or a busboy, and we paid about $600,000. And 97% of all the people who were eligible to come into the fund did so. Only 94 people opted to litigate instead. And they all settled their litigation cases 5 years later. 2 people, a priest and an 82-year-old woman who lost her son at the World Trade Center, only 2 people did nothing. They did not come into the fund, and they never filed a lawsuit. Paralyzed by grief, they did nothing. My biggest disappointment. That was the fund. Now, in 2005, after I completed my tenure as the special master of the 9/11 Fund, I wrote a book, a memoir, about my experience in designing and administering the program. And that book was called What is Life Worth? And it told the story, my memoir, of how we went about processing claims, some of the difficult problems that arose, some of the heart-wrenching stories we heard, some of the emotional trauma that we confronted from survivors and family members. That was in 2005. That book, What is Life Worth? It's now been over 15 years since I wrote that book. You may have trouble finding the book today on Amazon, although now that the movie's out, I think you'll be able to get a reprinted version of the book. But don't worry, I already told Katya, if you have trouble finding the book, just let us know. My personal supply of that book is virtually inexhaustible. So I wouldn't worry about anybody having difficulty finding the book. I think it's in every room in my home. So we'll manage to get anybody copies who can't locate the book. But here's the interesting story about the movie. In 2007, a Hollywood movie producer, Sean Sorensen, came to me. Ken, I read your book. It will make a fabulous movie, and I'm prepared to buy the exclusive rights to your book to make a movie. I told him I thought it highly, highly unlikely that the book and all the trauma that I went through, I thought it highly unlikely that the book could ever be transferred to the screen. I didn't think it was possible. It was a very emotional and horrific experience, very debilitating. And I didn't think a movie could be made that would accurately convey what we went through. Sorensen disagreed. And he said, I'll pay you a 2-year exclusivity fee so that you'll let me develop a script and you won't sell the book rights to anybody else. I said to him, you're wasting your money, but okay. That was in 2007. In 2009, 11, 13, 15, 17, 10 years, every 2 years, he re-upped exclusivity and sent me a check every 2 years just to maintain exclusive rights to make the film. Lo and behold, in 2018, I open an envelope and I see inside a large check with a note. We are exercising our exclusive rights. We are making a film of your book, What is Life Worth? We're going to call it Worth. And we're paying you half of what we agreed to pay in the event that a movie was made, signed to be made. You'll get the other half when we actually begin filming. Well, 10 years after I wrote the book, 10 years after I finished my work as the administrator of the fund, I received the script from Max Borenstein. I reviewed the script, made some comments, suggested certain changes in the script. And then 18 months later, I got the other 50% of the book rights and was told, we now have a script and we're beginning filming a movie. Ken, you will be played by Michael Keaton. Batman, pretty good. And your wife will be played by Talia Balsam. And your colleague, very important, Camille Byros, will be played by Amy Ryan. And one of your 9/11 critics, who eventually came around to be your ally, will be played by Stanley Tucci. And the film will be shown at the Sundance Film Festival in January of 2019. Well, the entire Feinberg family took a plane to the Sundance Film Festival in Park City, Utah. We saw the film, packed audiences, excellent reviews, and we waited for the film to be released and shown in movie theaters around the country. Mother Nature intervened. The pandemic, the virus, and everything, as you know, was shut down. And the movie, which was going to be released in the spring of 2019, went on the shelf. There were no movie theaters to show it. Everything was closed. For a year, the movie was in cold storage. And then, about 6 weeks ago, Netflix bought the film rights from the producers, and the film was co-produced on Netflix by President Obama's Higher Ground movie company. Obama and his family had seen the film and loved it, and so they co-produced the film. And about 6 weeks ago, the film became a top-ranked showing on Netflix. Very, very, very good movie reviews from the various critics. And the movie is now available on Netflix. For a few weeks, it was ranked it was ranked 3, 2, 4. Even now, 6 weeks later, it's still ranked in the top 10 in terms of hits by subscribers to see the film. Now, the film, much to my surprise, largely succeeded in conveying some of the stress and some of the heart-wrenching drama that we went through in listening to over 1,000 individual family members or victims that came to see me personally. They were afforded an opportunity, if they wanted to come and see me. Now, no one who came to see me, first of all, anybody who wanted to see me could see me in confidential secrecy. Anything that people who wanted a hearing to talk to Ken Feinberg, they could come and see me behind closed doors with no one present to tell me anything they wanted to tell me. I personally conducted about 950 separate hearings. This is all laid out in the book, What is Life Worth? But I conducted about 950 separate hearings with family members who lost loved ones and from victims who survived but were horribly disfigured. Now, the people who came to see me, almost never did they come to talk about money. They didn't come to see me and advocate that they wanted more. No. The people who came to see me came for two purposes. One, to vent about life's unfairness. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my daughter in the World Trade Center. She was an angel, 19 years old, and now she's dead. There is no God. No God could allow the death of my daughter. The government was asleep at the switch. This should have never happened. Or people came to see me to validate the memory of a lost loved one. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my wife at the Pentagon. We had been married for 25 years. And at this private hearing, I want to show you a video of our marriage 25 years ago. Well, Mr. Jones, you don't have to show me that video. It'll be very emotional, and it won't have any bearing on compensation. You're going to watch. I want to show you what those murderers did to my angel. And then he would show me a film, a tape of the marriage 25 years ago. Now, I'm asked all the time, what was the most difficult part of your job? Was it calculating the value of a human life? No, that's not that hard to do. Calculating value of lives is done every day in every court in Minnesota, county, state, federal, in every state in our union, every city, village, and hamlet, judge and jury determine what would the victim have earned over a work life, add something for pain and suffering, emotional distress equals the value of a human life. That is not rocket science. It's done every day in thousands of courts. The hard part, the most difficult part, was the emotion. Mr. Feinberg, you're offering me $3 million for my wife, for my husband, for my son. They haven't even found his body yet. And you're here offering money? Keep the money, bring my son back. How's that? That was the hard part. And the stories we heard, which are reflected in Worth, in the movie, the stories were chilling. A lady came to see me, 26 years old, sobbing. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my husband at the World Trade Center. He was a fireman. And he left me with our two children, 6 and 4. Now, Mr. Feinberg, you're going to give me $2.6 million for the death of my husband. I want it in 30 days. Well, Mrs. Jones, I said to her, Mrs. Jones, why do you need the money in 30 days? This is public taxpayer money from the US Treasury. They may have to go through the bureaucracy. It may take 60 days or 90 days. You'll get the money. No, 30 days. Why? Why do you need the money in 30 days? Why, Mr. Feinberg? I'll tell you why. I have terminal cancer. I have 10 weeks to live. My husband was going to survive me and take care of our 2 little ones. Now they're going to be orphans. Mr. Feinberg, I don't have much time. Now I have to set up a trust. I have to find a guardian while I still have my faculties. Help me. Well, we ran down to the Treasury. We processed her claim in record time. We got her the funds. 8 weeks later, she died. She died. No, nothing can prepare you for stories like this. Another lady came to see me. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my son. He was a fireman at the World Trade Center, and he died. Mr. Feinberg, when he ran down to the World Trade Center, he saw that 20 people were trapped in the lobby of the building. He ran in, rescued them, and brought them to safety. He saw that another 20 people were trapped. He ran into the building a second time, brought them to safety. While my son was running across the World Trade Center plaza, he was killed when somebody jumped from the 103rd floor and hit him like a missile, killing them both. Mr. Feinberg, if my son had taken one step either way, he'd be alive today. Instead, they both died. Don't tell me there's a God, Mr. Feinberg. No God could allow my son to die that way. Story after story after story. Debilitating. I still have nightmares about some of these stories. Now, the movie Worth does a very good job of conveying to the viewer the stress of what we went through during 33 months of processing claims like I've just given you an example about. Now, let me just tell anybody who sees the film, it does take a fair amount of dramatic license. You'll see at the very beginning of the film that the film is based on a true story. Well, that's right. Most of what you see is accurate, but some very, very important aspects of the film are fiction, designed to promote the drama and accelerate the drama for the viewer. And I understand that. I understand that. I think, much to my surprise, that Worth succeeds in reminding the American people of the atmosphere and the stress that went into the administration of the fund. Now, I also want to mention this before I take questions, because I follow Katya's directions, you see. But let me just say this. I've been asked quite a bit since the movie was released by Netflix. What is the message that you hope to convey in the film? Why is the film relevant today? I mean, the 9/11 fund was 20 years ago. What is there about the film that you hope will be relevant to the American people in watching it 20 years later? And I give the same answer every time. When you see this film, you will see something that you don't see today in America. You will see bipartisanship, apolitical, no red states, blue states, no liberal, conservative. It is the nation as one, rallying, one community of 50 states, rallying around the victims. I remember back in 2001, the former chief of staff of Senator Ted Kennedy, Ken Feinberg, being designated special master of the fund by President George Bush and Attorney General John Ashcroft, three of my heroes. And I remember Attorney General Ashcroft telling me, Ken, when it comes to the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund, we are one country, one nation, acting on behalf of these victims. There, but for fortune, it could be any one of us. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time. But we as a people will demonstrate how we work together in times of crisis to come to the rescue of those in need. And that really is the message today. I can't pick up a newspaper or watch TV without political bickering, cultural disagreement, advocacy, one side or the other, no quarter, no willingness to compromise. Take a look at the 9/11 fund as exhibited in Worth, and you will see how the country did rally and come to the rescue of those 5,300 victims in record time. So that is sort of the background to the making of the film. I spent my last, I'll just close with this. I spent about one day with Michael Keaton in Brooklyn, New York. He wanted to know more about my physical mannerisms, my New England accent from Brockton, Massachusetts. He wanted to know about my work. He wanted to know what it was like administering the fund. He had read the book. And then when they were making the film in Westchester, New York, a lot cheaper than filming in New York City, I spent 2 days with him again and the cast in New York filming the film in Westchester, and really got to know him, a wonderful human being, and he was very respectful. And it was fun, actually, watching them make the film. You know, I must tell you, when you go to see Worth or any movie, you may think that if a movie is an hour and a half or an hour and 3/4, that's how long it took them to film it. Oh, no, no, no. You gotta be extremely patient. I spent with my wife a whole day watching them film probably 7 minutes of actual film time. It is a lot of work making a movie, but it was, shall we say, an extraordinary experience. My great-great-grandchildren, I guess, will be able to watch the film. I asked my children when they saw the film at Sundance, what did they think of it? And they said, well, the film is pretty good. Michael Keaton, he's all right as you, Dad, but tell him he ought to stick with Batman. And I took that as faint praise. So that is my introduction. Katya asked me to spend about 30 minutes, half the time. I've done that. And now I throw it open to Katya or anybody else. If you have any questions about the film or my experience in making the film, I'll be glad to respond to questions.
Thank you so very much, Ken. It is just amazing to hear everything that, you have a wealth of knowledge and this extraordinary experience you went through. And I can only imagine your emotions when you were writing the book. So I wanted to, I have several questions, but I know that others will have as well. And I wanted to ask you this. I watched the movie in the first day that it was released in the Netflix. So I was curious, did you keep in touch with Charles Wolf, played by the wonderful Stanley Tucci? And in any case, how do you think that relationship that you developed with him at that time changed your work, and how do you think it changed or touched your soul, the Ken Feinberg of 2021?
Well, first of all, I've maintained some contact with Charles Wolf over the years. In fact, at the premiere at Sundance, I saw him and we exchanged gratitudes that the film had finally been made. I think the film does take some dramatic license with Charles Wolf's role in the successful implementation of the 9/11 fund. But that's part of the movie. That's drama. That's the great Stanley Tucci. So I can understand that. And I do think Charles Wolf did play an important role in improving the empathetic relationship between the fund and the various claimants. And in response to your question, I would say that one thing I learned from my administration of the 9/11 Fund, with the help of Charles Wolfe, is the importance of empathy, the importance of providing victims who are very fragile emotionally the opportunity, if they want, to have a hearing and vent in private. And I think that lesson that I learned in the 9/11 Fund has stayed with me ever since.
Thank you. Maury has a question. Maury, please.
Thanks, Mr. Feinberg, for doing this. It was great, and we
Oh,
saw
this is the fellow who used to be a lawyer but was reformed.
I was reformed. I became a law professor.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's great.
Just one quick personal note. Julie and I saw the movie a couple nights ago. Our son, who lives in New York, on September 11th, 2001, was supposed to be working at, I think it was 7 World Trade Center. We didn't know that his job had been moved uptown. And when I walked into school that morning and saw the planes on the television, my world almost came to an end. I can't imagine what it would have been like being one of those people. And I can't imagine what it would have been like being you, facing the anger and sorrow of all of those people. And before I became a law professor, I was a personal injury lawyer. So I know something about trying to value at least pain and suffering. My question, though, is to what extent there were some very cynical statements in the film, and I must say I haven't read the book, cynical statements in the film from some of your critics and some of the claimants that, well, this was just a ploy by the government to keep you from, it was big corporations, to keep you from, the injured people, to keep you from crashing the economy. And my feeling is there is some sense to that, that if 9,000 or 7,000 people had sued the airline companies, the economy would have been crashed. And so I'm just wondering about your reaction to that.
I think there's some truth to that. I think that if the airlines hadn't lobbied the Congress for some protection against lawsuits, there wouldn't have been a 9/11 fund. Now, having said that, I must say, you could have precluded, as you well know, you could have prevented lawsuits without providing over $7 billion in compensation to 5,300 people. I mean, I think the 9/11 fund was a combination of lobbying by the airlines and the World Trade Center, along with a very healthy dose of patriotism and a desire on the part of our elected officials representing the American people to demonstrate to the world that we take care of our own. And I don't think it's fair to either cynically say it was all a ploy by American business. When you look at the effort by the American people to come to the rescue of these people in a very generous way, I think that that cynicism should be tempered by the idealism of the American people and their desire to be empathetic and supportive of families that lost loved ones or who were terribly injured. So there's a balance there, I think. Other question?
Yes. Gail has one question.
I was just curious, those few who did decide not to go through the fund, but who sued later, what kind of settlements did they get?
Some received more than they would have received under the fund. But remember, if they got more, whatever they got, 25% of it went to their lawyers. And some got less. I think those who decided not to participate in the fund had to live with the horror for another 5 years before they settled their cases. You know, it's interesting. 94 people opted out of the fund. There never was a trial, ever, on responsibility for 9/11. All 94 people settled. There was never judge and jury. There was never a trial verdict on who was responsible, if anyone. And I think that those 94 people had every right, if they wanted to litigate, go ahead. But they wisely decided to settle after another 5 years of angst and horror and stress and emotional upheaval.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Gail. Eli has a question.
Hi, Mr. Feinberg. Congratulations about all you passed through, movie, the film, all the things that we can learn with this whole situation. But my question is, we that have more than 30 and 40 and 50 years, we experienced the facts about September 11, but maybe the young people, the young kids that has less than 30 years, maybe 20, 25, they didn't experience all those days. Do you think the film and your book, but mainly the film, will be able to learn for these young people all the things that this tragic situation bring to United States and all the changes in society that we experienced during these 20 years? Like heritage, I don't know if this word, but maybe a heritage for this new generation and the next generations.
As I said earlier, that's a very good question. I do think the film can have a major impact on demonstrating, especially to young people who now are witnessing such political and cultural polarization in this country. See that film and you see how the American people rallied around those victims and how we can be one community in the United States. It can be done. And hopefully the movie Worth and the book, What is Life Worth, can help convey to younger people a couple of very important principles, first advanced when I was a child by President John F. Kennedy. President Kennedy said, government is not a dirty word. Serving the public interest is a noble undertaking. And most importantly, President Kennedy said, every single individual can make a difference. Now, I think the film, Worth, does convey to younger people those principles. And at a time where young people only see backstabbing and nitpicking and criticism and polarization, look, folks, only 20 years ago, look and see how America as one community rallied around the victims. I think that's a great lesson from the film.
Is there any kind of movement to, we have Netflix, of course, but is there any kind of movement to bring this film or your book to the high school schools
I hope so.
or colleges?
Hey, listen, if a high school will read my book, I'll deliver the book myself. I mean, I'll take a year off and just deliver the book around to the United States. Anybody wants to read the book. I have so many copies of that book in my house that I could probably deliver free copies to every high school in the United States. I don't know about that. So, and if you come to my home and you turn on the television, all you can watch is Worth. It's on every TV in my house 24/7. You can't get anything else. If you want to get Lawrence of Arabia on TV, you won't be able to, because Worth is being shown in every TV screen.
Oh, that's a good idea, Lee. You can talk to your school and get them reading his book. Thank you for the question. Marian has a question. Please, Marian.
Yes, I wanted to bring up the fact that as a result of 9/11, we have had so much racism, anti-Islam, anti-Jew, anti-this, anti-that, anti-Arab, anti-Iranian, anti-God knows what. It all seemed to start at that time. So when we are talking about the younger generation, and when we are even talking about some of those that are older but choose to see things differently or follow the racist approach, what would be your recommendation, or what would be your solution to addressing that issue?
I think it's being addressed today, and I agree with you, but I would say this. I think 9/11 may have triggered a new wave of racism and anti-Semitism in this country. But it's always been there. It's always been there. And I think that what we're seeing now with Black Lives Matter and critical race theory and videos of police brutality, I just think it's all coming now sort of like to a transparent head in our American society. And I think it's all part of one effort. 9/11 may have accelerated it, but I think it's all part of one effort today to begin the hard process of distinguishing myth from the reality. And it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a long time. I think movies like Worth and stark video of George Floyd and some of these other shootings, I think are all part of the effort to sort of stop airbrushing American history. And let's look at the hard choices and the hard realities we confront. I think as a country, we can address them, but it will take time.
It is also a world issue. It's not just in the U.S. It's
I think that's right.
All over the world. The Nazism and some of the other elements, you're seeing it in France, you're seeing it in Germany, you're seeing it in England. It's an epidemic, to be honest with you.
I think that's right, but I also think that right now you should take some hope that it's all now being no more airbrush. Now we're focusing on issues, and maybe it's much later than we should have, but I do think we're seeing a new realism about the reality of what we confront, and I think that's a major important step forward.
Let's hope that it produces positive results.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marian. Nancy, please.
Yes, I don't know if everyone noticed at the end of the film, where it was scrolling what happened in real life after, and it's indicated that you continue to administer these compensation funds. I took a screenshot. So you continued this kind of work with the Virginia Tech shootings, the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill, Aurora, Colorado shootings. I'll skip some here, but the Pulse nightclub, Catholic Church sexual abuse claims, you know, on and on here. So first of all, I just commend you for remaining a human being in the midst of facing so much tragedy. I mean, I feel your humanism and I admire being able to case after case after case face this kind of tragedy and then help people to the extent that you can with the funds. But is there anything you want to share about any of those? And you were saying how this film really demonstrated a time when our country came together in unity. And of course, now there's so much divisiveness. So is there anything related to that in terms of all this continuing work that you're doing that you'd like to share with us?
Couple of things. First of all, those other programs that you reference at the end of Worth that are mentioned, my subsequent work, those are aberrations, really. You know, these funds don't occur all that often. That end of the film points out maybe 10 or 15 programs that like one a year. They're not all that common. And when I'm asked by a Congress or a president or a governor or a mayor to come to help design and administer a compensation program, I'm glad to do that. Now, I'll let you folks in Minnesota, you'll recall this. It was probably, what, 10 or 15 years ago, I got a call from elected officials in Minnesota when that bridge fell into the river in I think, Minneapolis, St. Paul. And there were some people that were killed and injured. And sure enough, elected officials in Minnesota asked me to come to Minnesota and discuss with them how to create a government compensation program. And I came out and advised, I think Minnesota did, in fact, compensate the victims and the families of those who lost loved ones in that bridge collapse. But I want to emphasize something that's often lost in this discussion. People say to me, Ken, the 9/11 fund was fabulous. It worked. It worked as Congress intended. Do you think we should replicate it? Should we have a 9/11 fund for the coronavirus? Or should we have a 9/11 fund for a hurricane? Or a 9/11 fund for an earthquake or a tornado? And I tell people, no, I think the 9/11 fund was a success. Don't ever do it again. You should have read some of the letters I received when I was administering the fund. Dear Mr. Feinberg, my son died in Oklahoma City in the Albert Murrah building that was bombed by a domestic terrorist. Where's my check? Dear Mr. Feinberg, I don't get it. My daughter died in the basement of the World Trade Center in the original 1993 attacks committed by the very same type of people. Why aren't I eligible? And it wasn't just terrorism. Dear Mr. Feinberg, last year, my wife saved 3 little girls from drowning in the Mississippi River. And then she drowned a heroine. Where's my check? You better be careful about setting up these very generous programs for just a select few. Bad things happen to good people every day in this country. There's no 9/11 fund. And I think we better be very, very careful about making some sort of government compensation a guarantee for every innocent misfortune. That's not America. So those are my thoughts on that.
Good. Thank you, Nancy. Fred has a question.
Notice Mary Ellen as well.
Yes.
Anyway, after Fred.
Yes.
And Jack.
So during your introduction, I was fascinated and continue to be fascinated after watching the movie anyway with this process. And the fact that you spoke personally to over 900 people, 950 people, I think you said. I'm not sure I've personally done that in 7 years or maybe longer. But in light of your description as well, during the introduction of those conversations, even watching a movie and really, as was just said, being human about it, actually listening, I've got a question about time management and just behind the scenes. And because you did it in record time, you said, so can you just tell us about that and how you managed to do that yourself and with your team to be able to speak to that many people?
We
to get the
gave,
job done?
It's a very good question, a very good question. Now, I can tell you that we managed to convey to people that although they could ramble if they wanted, but brevity was a virtue. And we were very nice about it and empathetic about it, but I probably did about 8 or 9 hearings a day. And what I learned is after you do a few of these horrible stories, you better take a break and walk around the park. You better go for a walk. You better buy an ice cream. You better watch little kids playing in a playground. You'll go mad if you hear one of these, one after another, all more horrific than the last. So you manage to carve out the time. If you do 8 or 9 at about 30 minutes a clip, that's a half a day's work or 3/4 of a day's work with a break, etc. Don't forget now, half the people didn't want to come and see me of the dead. Half of the families, it's very interesting. There are many, many people that grieve in private. They don't want anybody. They shut the door. They close the curtains and they grieve in private. And they're entitled to do that. So it was debilitating. It was a nightmare. I've never got over it in the sense that I still wake up certain nights remembering a particular story or a horrific account, and you live with it. But the president of the United States asks you to take on this assignment. It's pretty hard to tell him I'm busy and I can't do it. So you're a patriot and you're asked to do it, so you do it. Good question. Also, I will tell you something else that was very useful that's, as you know, is conveyed well in the movie. During the day, I'm dealing with the horrors of civilization, what fellow human beings can do to each other. At night, the height of civilization, opera, classical music, Beethoven, Verdi, Puccini, Wagner, Bach, all uplifting. And you realize at night, when you're away from it all and you're listening to the height of civilization, what a difference it can make.
That's so true. Thank you, Fred. Mary Ellen has a question, Mary.
Thank you so much, Mr. Feinberg, for all that you have given to us through your commitment and your loyalty. My question dovetails on Nancy and Fred in that I have known of your work and the insights that you have offered, and I stumbled upon the film Worth even before this was a noted topic for the program tonight. One of the things that has repeatedly come into my mind as I thought about all you've done, not only because you're a patriot, as you mentioned, but for the insights it's offered into you and to your growth and to your own development as a human being. How have you seen yourself change from these experiences? And how then does that impact each successive monitoring and distribution?
I don't know, this group has come up with some of the greatest questions I've ever confronted. I think, Katya, I think you made sure everybody was on their best behavior tonight. What a question that is. Now, let me try and answer that question.
Oh, good.
First of all, I can tell you that as a result of my experience in 9/11, I am much more fatalistic today than I ever was. I don't think I plan now more than 2 weeks in advance. Everyone, what I learned about 9/11 is everyone may think that they have got their life mapped out, but life has a way of changing of altering the best plans. Everyone gets thrown curveballs sooner or later. And I'm a little less assured of my day-to-day activity and what I'm going to plan next week and the week after and the week after. People on 9/11 had no idea what would befall them as a result of that unforeseen tragedy. I also think that I've become, as a result of 9/11, a much better listener. People ask me, was my law degree a help in 9/11? I say, well, I don't think it hurt. I don't think it helped. Better a divinity degree or a degree in psychiatry in dealing with people emotionally distraught and depressed and angry. I'm a better listener. I think I'm more empathetic to the plight of claimants and people who come to see me. Sometimes I think I have to be a rabbi rather than a lawyer or a priest. And I just think I'm more understanding than I probably was. And I think the movie sort of conveys that. Michael Keaton's journey from being sort of a cold lawyer, teaching in the classroom. At the end, he's so empathetic and so understanding and so sensitive. And that's what I've learned. And in these subsequent programs, you see, building on what we learned in 9/11, we give everybody a hearing and we're empathetic and we're listening. I don't think we changed the calculations very much, but it's the whole approach of valuing the lives that's just as important as how much money. And I think that's what we learned. I ought to have this group just follow me around to public schools. This is a fabulous group.
Thank you so much, Mary Ellen. Jack has a question. Please, Jack.
Good evening, Mr. Feinberg. Thank you for all you've done in your career, and thank you for being here. The question I have is somewhat related to the previous question. The movie depicts certain plateaus that were reached in getting people to sign up to the program. I remember the 15% plateau. And then 51%. What is your recollection of those moments where something you've heard or something that was said that made a difference in propelling you to the next platform?
First of all, when I mention dramatic license. Let me tell everybody a secret. There was never any doubt in my mind, ever, that we would reach the plateau. There was never any doubt. The program was so generous and so easy to apply for that I was always confident that we would reach the plateau. Second, the statute didn't reference any particular percent. You're right, the movie does, 85%. There was never any percent. The Congress had no idea when it set up this program how many people would come into it. And one of the achievements of the program was getting 97% to participate. So I was never concerned about that. But you raise a very important point. In all of the programs, 9/11, but all of them that are referenced at the end of the film, all these other programs, it is very important when you set up one of these programs to announce a very transparent final date for which you can apply for compensation. Very important. If you have an open-ended program, file whenever you want. People will procrastinate. That's human nature. They'll delay. They'll find reasons not to apply. They'll be uncertain. When you say to people, you better apply by October 1st or you're out of luck, you won't be able to file after. You watch, in the 9/11 fund, over half the claims came in the last 6 months of a 33-month program. People wait and wait and wait and wait, and then they have no choice. They file. And that's why in all of my subsequent programs, there's a deadline. There's a deadline which acts as an automatic incentive to get people to file. And they do. Look, the two people that did nothing in the 9/11 fund, they didn't file with me, and they never filed a lawsuit either. Those were my biggest disappointments. One was a priest, came and said to me, I'm not filing. I lost my brother, but I'm not going to file. It was God's will. I said, Father, spare me God's will. File the claim, take the $2 million and give it to Catholic charities if you want. But don't lose the opportunity. He wouldn't do it. And the other lady, an 82-year-old woman, was so paralyzed by grief, I couldn't get her to file. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my son and you're here offering me money? She never filed. Those were the only two. Others came in or filed a lawsuit. Either way, I was comfortable with that.
Thank you, Jack. Bharat has a question. Bharat? You are muted.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Feinberg. This is an amazing experience for me to witness the experiences and your observations and your. One question I have, in fact, I have two questions. One question I have relates to you, and that is, question is it this experience of going through this entire process that you talked about that makes you what you are now that we have witnessed? Or was the wisdom there to begin with for you to be able to parse the pieces and to come to that? That's oftentimes, we become very wise based on our experiences, but sometimes we have to have that within us to be able to experience the experience that way. And I'm very, very much moved by how deeply empathetic you have been to all these various situations in the way you described it. So that'll be something that I know would be an important learning for all of us, if you can shed some light on that. And then
I have
I'll ask
no-
you the other question.
I have no doubt in my mind that whatever skills I bring to these programs, I learned and grew from my youth, not from the funds themselves. I grew up in a blue collar town, Brockton, Massachusetts. And I grew up at a time when a resident of Massachusetts, John F. Kennedy, was president. And it was John F. Kennedy who had a tremendous influence on my secular development in terms of the Peace Corps and giving back to the country and one community, and every individual can make a difference. That had a profound impact on me. I also was very fortunate that I grew up in a very loving Jewish home and learned all about Jewish values and how in the Jewish religion, how the community rallies around a grieving individual who lost a loved one, with the community-wide Shiva, the meetings in the home, the graveyard, the graveside ceremony, guarding the body the night before burial. Everybody in the community participating in an attempt to insulate the grieving victim from too much grief. I learned a lot about that. And I think you ask a profound question. I don't think that my empathy or my approach to death and tragedy was self-help as a result of fortuity in doing something like the 9/11 Fund. I think it all was nurtured from my youth and my development as a human being, so that I was sort of, even if it was unknown at the time, time tested and ready for this horror and this tragedy. So that's the answer to the question, I think.
Thank you.
And now you can't possibly have a second question more deep and provocative than that one.
Well, you may be right, because it's not so much a question, but it's a wish. And this comes out of my hearing you say towards the end of your presentation here, how different America is now than the time when how everything came together. So with the wisdom that I feel that you have, are there some things that you can talk about that we could do to change this crazy road in which we are, traveling? We have climate change, we have pandemic, we have all these issues that are global. We have all the equity issues, all the race relations crises. I mean, you name it. The world is the largest amount of malnutrition all around. So the fate of the planet itself is in a dire straits. With all those kinds of issues coming in, and the crazy way in which our society is governing itself, come on, give us some light.
Leadership. Leadership. I think that if we can elect at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, the right type of leaders to guide us moving forward. It's not a Democrat Republican issue. I think that someone in the White House like John F. Kennedy, someone in the White House like Ronald Reagan, for all of their flaws, and they had many flaws, I think that type of inspirational leadership is very, very important in helping us come together as one. I just think the problems are so complex and so diverse, but I think it starts at the top. And I think that our ability to elect people who will take it upon themselves to risk all in trying to solve problems and not just get reelected, I think that's the challenge, finding people like that. I really think that's the challenge. I mean, I travel around the country and I must tell you, and I love Minnesota. I love Minnesota. I must tell you, I'm an East Coast person. When I go to the West Coast, I'm sort of still an East Coast, West Coast person. You go to America's heartland, you make a visit to Kansas or Nebraska or the Deep South. And I mean, I was in Montana, there wasn't anybody wearing a mask. Nobody. The hotel, they knock on the door, we've come to clean your room. The lady's there without a mask. I say, come back later. I mean, I couldn't believe it. That's the way it is. It's like 2-3 countries we live in.
Yes.
Anyway, that's a political philosophy discussion. Katya, do we have any more time? Are we about done, or you tell me? You're the boss. I don't want to get in trouble.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, I have one for you. It's still in the leadership field, because we always hope that the younger generation can learn from, people like you. And so perhaps you could give an advice for them, and I'm gonna say for us as well. So you're an attorney and you have your practice. You work you teach in several law schools, many times at the same time, simultaneously in different law schools. You wrote 2 books, not at once, but you did. You have a wife and 3 kids. How, and I'm going to, actually, it's kind of what Fred actually asks, about time management, but how do you manage everything, to do everything so well, and you still can find time? And I hope that you still find some time to sleep from midnight to 6.
First of all, you make a big assumption. Don't assume that I do everything so well. You don't know that. I may be able to write a book. I may be able to help make a movie. I may be able to help compensate innocent victims of tragedy. My wife is my hero. Don't assume that all of this is done in a time frame where I'm not shortchanging other people. I'm not where I should be, maybe for a birthday party or an event involving one of my kids or my grandchildren now. I have been extremely fortunate that in other aspects of my life, I have a partner who's dedicated to making sure that it's a team effort. Having said that, yes, I think you're right in your implicit assumption that I don't sleep more than 5 hours a night. Sometimes you wake up with nightmares anyway. You can't sleep. You remember the victim here or the victim there, or the person who says to me, Mr. Feinberg, you're giving me $2 million. Give me my leg back that's been blown off. Keep your $2 million. I want my leg. You don't forget stuff like that. So you try and manage your time in a very structured way. My desk at the office is always clean. It's all structured. But don't assume it's that easy. And when you say everything I do is successful, you don't know that. And I can tell you, Katya, that it takes more than just me. At my home, my wife, at the office, in the movie, you'll see Amy Ryan playing Camille Byros, my colleague for 40 years, who is a saint and is the real reason for much of the success of the 9/11 Fund. So you got to have allies. You have to have allies in your personal life, in your professional life, and you've got to try your best to organize in a way that minimizes minimizes the downside risk of doing so much. And that's a challenge, it is, but I do my best. And I must say, I want to talk to Katya offline, figure out how I can get all of you to just follow me around wherever I go, so you can ask these questions. I mean, these are the best questions I've ever received. This is fabulous. I think I enjoyed this more than the audience did. These questions are, I'm guaranteed I'm not sleeping tonight. I got to figure out if there are better answers to some of these questions. But thank you all very much.
I'll make sure that you can, that everybody can contact Ken, so everybody actually knows how to contact me, but I will make sure that everybody's in contact with you for sure, Ken.
Next time I come to Minnesota, next time I'm in Minneapolis or St. Paul, I won't go north of Minneapolis or St. Paul, too cold. But Minneapolis or St. Paul, maybe I'll come. I may be coming to the University of Minnesota to give a lecture. I'll let you guys know if I do that.
I'll make sure that I will host you.
I have a request. You said a lot of the space in your home is taken by your book. I'll be happy to have one of those books. I don't have it.
No problem. Let Katya know. I'll send you an inscribed copy. I'll send you with the questions you asked, I'll send you both books.
Well, make sure that mine comes with an autograph.
Good enough, it will. A special thank you to you, Katya, for helping organize this. Really, it was fabulous.
Of course. And actually, before I let you give your last and final thoughts, before that, I want to say two things. First thing is, everybody, Ken's birthday is on October 23rd. So, and he's here instead of preparing for the party. So Ken, happy birthday. I'm a big birthday person. I love birthdays. And from the bottom of my heart and everybody that's here, and on behalf of CGS Minnesota, big happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
The second
go
thing,
ahead, the second thing.
Yes, the second thing before, no, you still have a say. So the second thing, so a quick announcement, but I know that everybody will ask this offline, so I want to make sure that everybody knows. Well, first of all, on behalf of CGS Minnesota, I want to thank you all for attending this event, and I wanted to acknowledge the members of board of directors who are here, Nancy Dunlavy Barat Parek, Gail Hughes, and Dick Bernard. Thank you so much. And Marian Youssef Zadi. Thank you so much for everything, for allowing this to happen. And on behalf of CGS, thank you all for attending. If you want to watch again, the recording of this very program will be in our website and on our YouTube channel. Also, CGS Minnesota hosts events every month. Please visit our website to learn what the next events are, but I'm going to give you some hints. October 26th, next week, we will host a human rights forum about immigration with a guest speaker, Michelle Rivero, who is the director of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs in the city of Minneapolis. November 18, our movie discussion is Hotel Rwanda, and the guest speaker directly from Belgium is Karine Kanimba, the daughter of the very man who inspired the movie and who was kidnapped and is currently in prison in Rwanda. In November 24, we will host our own human rights forum about Yemen with the internationally awarded Fadia Tabet, a human rights advocate who will tell us what is happening in Yemen now. You can't wait, you can't miss. And with that, I would invite Ken, our birthday man, our inspiration with the person who we learned so much and who has inspired and is going to inspire this to so many more. Thank you for the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of CGS, I let you with your final thoughts.
Thank you very, very much. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Good night.
Night.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, everybody. I hope to see you very soon.